It's Clipperblog Live. It is Monday, August 25th, coming at you during the Emmys, which was a cool choice for us, but this is important stuff to talk about this summer. From Los Angeles, we have Andrew Hahn.
Hello, everyone. Long time no see. Um, First time call. What's that thing they say? First time caller, first time listen. No, that doesn't make sense at all. Anyways, as we're off to a smashing start.
From an undisclosed location, Yovan Bua.
What's up, guys?
And from Anchorage, Seth Partnow. Seth, how are you doing?
I'm doing just fine, thanks. I'm embarrassed and feel bad for Andrew now, but we'll get past it, and no one will remember it by the end of our time here together. So only one way to go from here, buddy.
I think we're all embarrassed for each one of us at different times, and maybe this show can bear that out in some way. Also embarrassing has been the tenure of Donald Sterling as Clippers owner. But thankfully this summer that came to an end. Andrew, I know there's nothing you like more than talking about Donald Sterling.
Love
Why
it.
don't you put that in context for us when this finally was wrapped up after so much courtroom drama?
Um, where to begin with all of this? It's been so long since we've had a conversation, and just for our viewers out there that think like, oh, these guys must talk to each other all the time and must be up to speed on what we all think. That's not true at all. Like, we don't talk to each other ever unless it's being broadcast on the internet. So I don't really know what Seth, Patrick, or Jovan think about any of this. I'm just gonna start from the beginning. So in 1930s, I believe, Donald Sterling was born. And no, we're not gonna go all the way we're not gonna go that far back, but definitely there was a cloud lifted from Clipper Nation, from the Clippers team in general. I was one of the minority believers that thought that the Clippers, at a minimum, could make the conference finals last year, and probably would have if not for the controversy that kind of broke out. I know a lot of people around the team. I remember in Game 5, Game 5, Game 6, Game 4, one of the games in Los Angeles for the Oklahoma City Thunder Clippers series. A lot of the media were just kind of quietly saying to themselves that they thought the Clippers were going to win the series. I think Darren Collison had just anchored a miraculous comeback in Game 4, so this must have been Game 4. And it was tied 2-2, and people thought that the Clippers were going to beat the Thunder, go to the Western Conference Finals, and play the San Antonio Spurs. And it's just like a series of random flukes, brain farts, caused them to lose. Sterling's, I don't. What is the euphemism for this? Seth, do you have like a catch-all phrase you use for like Sterling's racism slash mistress affair slash slumlordism?
Shenanigans. That's not nearly as negative as we need it to sound. But
Right. It's so all of this is so preposterous. He's like a cartoon villain that
his Montgomery Burnsism.
yeah, and like I feel like he has like someone he had the Clippers franchise like roped to the train tracks, and he was like trying to drive a train over them. It's like that level of preposterousness.
So Snidely Whiplash is what you're going for.
But
yeah.
it had gotten to a point where everyone it was no longer tenable, and just you never realize how much it weighs on you until it's over, and just seemed like a huge weight was lifted off of everyone's shoulders.
Yeah, I mean, I've talked about this before, but I think Sterling has always just been the elephant in the room, and as we've seen the Clippers kind of transform the last 4 years, everything had changed. Now they got top 5 coach and Doc. Now they had 2 top 10 players and all-stars, superstars, whatever, in Chris and Blake. They kind of changed the culture into a playoff team, a contender. But Sterling was always just looming, and it was kind of just a matter of time until something like this happened. Maybe not to this magnitude. I don't think anyone expected, but I think we all kind of knew Sterling was like this, and that something like this could happen at any time. And then obviously once it did, it was just a whirlwind of news and speculation. And I write newsletters every day, and I was just tired of seeing the guy's face. Like I'm tired of reading the same thing about him, that he changes his mind, that he's trying to find some loophole in the system. Like, I'm just glad it's over with, and I'm just glad that we can move on from this situation, because it was just really unfortunate.
Yeah, and it probably behooves us to ignore the fine print and not spend any time talking about those loopholes and kind of the back and forth of all that, and look at where we are now. Seth, new owner, new hope, new problems. What do you think about the Steve Ballmer era and where we are today?
The danger is that thinking that everything, now that Sterling is gone, everything is going to be hunky-dory on the ownership front. Obviously, there's, nowhere to go but up, but that doesn't mean that the Clippers aren't in danger of kind of sort of the new, wants to be very involved owner kind of pratfalls that we see from time to time, whether it's the strangeness that happened in Memphis this summer with the coaching situation and their front office shakeup, or kind of I'd say kind of the embarrassing stuff that's kind of gone on in Sacramento in terms of their front office moves, the draft analytics thing, which it was an interesting idea, but it kind of made them look a little amateurish almost. And not saying that Ballmer's going to come in and say announce my presence with authority and the biggest mistake we made was, and this is near and dear to Andrew's heart, but we should never have let Eric Bledsoe go. Let's go get him, or something like that, and kind of demand to shake up the team right now, which that kind of stuff is in play, because it's a new owner who's a guy who's used to getting his way, who's used to being the smartest guy in the room, and is used to wielding a lot of power. So that said, it's still better than where the embarrassing situation that Sterling left the team in last playoffs, and for the 20 years prior that we kind of all sort of tried to ignore.
I just want to interject briefly here, and it's like a real question that I have, Patrick. Like, you're moderating, hosting the show today, but I'm going to throw my inquiry to you. Seth said there was nowhere to go but up with Sterling being gone, but like, do you feel like that's actually true? Because obviously, the Clippers have been terrible for eons, and I guess at an ownership level, there's nowhere to go but up. But Sterling was spending money the past, I want to say, like 8 or 9 years now, built the practice facility. In terms of basketball operations and roster talent, they're pretty good. I don't want to say that they're maxed out, but they're certainly close to the peak of what they can do with what they have at the moment. Do you feel like just switching the owner is going to be that much better, or do you think that maybe like Ballmer can kind of screw around with things much more easily than we're thinking of?
The idea that Ballmer can't make a mistake is, of course, ludicrous. Just because we don't have, he doesn't have the kind of sub-zero on the personality scale rating that Sterling had, that doesn't mean he can't make a bad decision or get overly involved or interrupt the processes. But I think it's worth noting that on multiple radio interviews that Doc Rivers has given since the announcement was made official, he's stressed that Ballmer has more than once come to him and said, how do I make sure I stay out of your way and make sure you guys have what you need to run this team the way that you see fit? And we can talk about whether that is lip service or whether that's the case, and that may totally be the case. It may just be kind of perfunctory, going through the motions, what we think people want to hear thing that Doc Rivers, in all his coaching brilliance, is so good at, and his media navigation brilliance. But I think we have to assume that no matter what, he's going to be a better owner. There really was not a worse owner in the history of sports, and a few years of kind of non-intervention on Sterling's part doesn't erase everything that came before it. And we don't know the extent to which Sterling really was allowing things to happen kind of unimpeded these last few years.
Oh yeah, just to follow up off what Patrick just said. I mean, we don't we do know, like Woj wrote that Sterling tried killing the Reddick trade, and there's been rumors of other trades that have happened that he's tried to kill or that he has killed. At the trade deadline, the Matt Barnes deal too. So it's like, yeah, he's been better, but we can't for certain say how much of that was him. But I will say I wrote about this because I was at the fan festival when Ballmer was introduced, and it could be lip service like Patrick said, but I did kind of get the vibe that Ballmer's super passionate. He's really eccentric. He's kind of out there. So I think we kind of get the Cuban vibe from him. But at the same time, he was saying, like, I attend 100+ basketball games a year, like including my sons playing high school and stuff. And I like honestly don't know that much about basketball strategy. Like I can't just break down X's and O's and like be the super smart guy. And that's what I have Doc for. And I kind of thought that, obviously he could just be, playing the media, but it sounded pretty candid. And I was like, okay, this guy knows he's not the smartest guy in the room when it comes to actual basketball decisions. Yes, he's going to, he said he's going to meddle in business stuff and try and help build the brand and, do other things on the non, actual like GM type stuff. But I think he's going to be giving the power to Doc. Now we can have a conversation of if that's a good thing or not. As I know, I'm sure Angie would have, some interesting things to say about that. But I do think Ballmer really cares about winning. And I'd kind of rather have that approach than whatever the hell Sterling was doing.
I want to. Someone remind me that we're gonna put a pin in Jovan being at the Clippers Fan Fest and covering all of that because, man, that looked intense at the time. But I just had a quick question on dealing with all of the new ownership and Ballmer stuff for Seth. There's been a fair number of ownership turnover in the NBA the past couple of years. The one that really sticks out in my mind with regards to the Clippers and Steve Ballmer is Vivek Ranadive and the Sacramento Kings. You mentioned the Kings briefly before, and how Vivek is also from a tech background and took over a franchise that had terrible ownership. How long do you think the honeymoon period lasts between a fan base and its new owner? When you're basically one of those, Sarah McLachlan abused dogs just looking for anyone to adopt you.
Wow. So you're basically asking me to take a run at the Kings off season, and I'd be happy to oblige. But I don't know. It's interesting situation there because they're also building a new arena, and all of a sudden, if the team stays bad and doing silly things like deciding that it wasn't worth the $2 million extra to have Isaiah Thomas play point guard instead of Darren Collison, and as from a Clipper standpoint, they're welcome to him. I think. I'm wondering how long that that honeymoon period is going to last. I mean, what happens if and when DeMarcus Cousins starts to say, starts to look around and like, I kind of would like to win some things at some point, and these guys are wasting the best years of my career. And in a way, the fact that we're terrible because we continually make terrible basketball decisions only exacerbates the narrative of me being some kind of loser hothead. Which if he's in a winning situation, he's passionate, but since his team has been terrible around him every year, he's a hothead. And I think that's at a certain point you got to think that he's going to look at Kevin Love going to into a much better situation and saying, I wish I could have some of that. And wherever that destination might be in 2-3 years, we can't really speculate yet. But about the time those rumblings start is, I think, about the time when the oh boy, what is this guy actually doing for our franchise? I know the Maloofs are pretty bad, but man, we should be doing better than this still. Um, I don't think it'll be that long in Sacramento, and I think that's sort of an object lesson. If the Clippers, who have much higher expectations than the Kings, if they falter over the next couple of years, and Doc the GM continues to not serve Doc the coach as well as he might, you might start to hear some things like, when is Ballmer going to step in and decide that Doc's a great coach, but he probably shouldn't be the GM also. And that might not even last until the trade deadline this year before we start hearing that, to be honest. In fact, I think the two of us, I think you agree with me on this, are probably already saying it now, Andrew. That's my long-winded answer.
So let's talk, but let's start to break this down. Doc the GM in year one had a pretty mixed record. Doc the coach, it's kind of tough to argue with. Doc the leader, I think we can agree, was pretty strong during some times that were extraordinarily difficult for a team to go through. It's interesting. What about this summer? Let's look at these moves that happened. Andrew, are the Clippers in better shape to win this year with this lineup than they were at the start of last year?
Yes. There's nothing else to add to that. Yes, they are. They're not, the Clippers organization and the way that their roster is constructed is not quite the same as the San Antonio Spurs, but you only have to look to the 2013 finals and a team that was certainly capable enough to win a title and ended up not winning because there are luck and chance factors involved in anything, caused them to lose. The Clippers in the 2014 playoffs proved that they were completely capable of making it to the Western Conference Finals. And personally, this is just my own personal viewpoint, I thought that the Clippers were a more difficult matchup for the Spurs than the Thunder were. I think the Thunder, they're both equal, or I guess you can say you prefer the Thunder if that's your cup of tea. But the Thunder play a brand of basketball that makes it much easier for the Spurs to do what they want to do. And I thought the Clippers would have had a better chance of getting past the Spurs and into the finals. So they didn't have to do anything big to remain just as competitive or improve their team.
Right, you're saying that a shocking Ray Allen three-pointer is that much different than Chris Paul having a totally uncharacteristic meltdown when the Clippers are up 7 points with seconds to go.
Right.
Either one of those could have gone either way. Don't mess with something that's pretty close. So the Clippers needed two things.
Roll it back.
The Clippers need. What do they need? They needed a big man who didn't absolutely kill them on both ends of the ball to come off the bench. They got that. They needed a point guard to replace Darren Collison, who they determined wasn't worth a massive pay increase. They got that, and they made.
There's
And
a
then
lot. There's a lot of criticism that people continue to lob out there that the Clippers need, that sturdy perimeter wing defender. Who's going to guard the Kevin Durant's of the world? Who's going to guard the LeBron Jameses of the world? Last I checked, the number of defenders that can capably do that, you can't. You only need what, 2-3 fingers to count those players. So the Clippers, if the Clippers probably aren't going to get them. That's always a team effort, and I think that that's a little overstated. How much they needed a lockdown perimeter wing defender.
I'm going to be a little more pessimistic on the offseason. Okay, so like the Spencer Hawes thing, like Patrick just said, they needed a big man who doesn't kill them on both ends. We don't know if he doesn't kill them defensively. I mean, I guess you could say there's no way he's worse than like Byron Mullins and Anton Jamison were in the first half of the season. But I mean, I don't know if he's an upgrade over Big Baby. He probably isn't, at least defensively. Obviously, as a player overall, he's a much better player. But I like the Hawes move. I personally really wanted them to get Ed Davis or Jordan Hill. We saw the two surprising contracts that both of those guys got on opposite ends of the spectrum. Taking Glenn Davis over Ekpe Udoh, I know that kind of sounds like kind of a dumb criticism, but I think like if you're going to have Spencer Hawes as your third big, your fourth big should probably be a defender and someone that could maybe play alongside him and protect the rim if he can't do that. And that's not Big Baby. So I would have rather preferred to see Ekpe Udoh there. Jordan Farmar, I think, is just as good, if not better, than Darren Collison, and he's going to be at 40% of the price. He's a considerably better three-point shooter and probably a better passer. Defensively, we can go into that. I think he's just as bad or as good, whatever light you want to look at it in. I think Collison was super overrated defensively, but I think most of us agree with that assessment. And then the other thing that kind of bothered me, which I know it's kind of a minor criticism too, was just the draft. I didn't get the C.J. Wilcox selection when you already have, basically three shooting. Like, we can argue over Reggie Bullock, but I think he's more of a shoot. Like, he's either a 2 or 3, but either way, he's ahead of C.J. Wilcox in the rotation most likely. So I just don't see where he's going to play. He's the sixth wing. And like he's not playing over Jamal or JJ. And I know that maybe he's a piece for the future, but he was basically Reggie Bullock 2.0, except shorter, not as good of a shooter, and just like not as good overall. So I don't really get the selection when you had like a Kyle Anderson there, a Jarnell Stokes, KJ McDaniels. There were Clancy early. There were guys there. It wasn't like almost no mock draft at him in the first round that I saw, and I saw multiple. So it just didn't make sense that they're saying he's the best player available. That kind of bothered me. I'll still give the Clippers about a B in the offseason, which is fine, but they are better. I still think that some of the problems we saw with Doc from year one have been there in year two, with picking guys that he prefers that were on the Celtics or played against the Celtics. And then kind of some questionable shooting, going with shooters, but guys that don't necessarily fit the roster, which is kind of, I think, what he did with Jamison and Mullins. He was like, oh, these guys can shoot. Well, they can't play defense or do anything else. And that's kind of my concern with the Wilcox selection.
I think I'd like to echo a lot of those criticisms. I think you're spot on with I think you basically named all the guys who I was going to name in terms of the draft, and then you start talking about free agency. Going from Collison to Farmar at 40% of the price is great. That's fine. Hawes for the full mid-level is a little more questionable. There's other guys. You have a Jason Smith who can play both 4 and the 5, can shoot. Maybe doesn't have the 3-point range, but can shoot a little. Is a better defender. You mentioned Udoh. There, Ed Davis. Jordan Hill. There are guys out there who fit better. And I think that Andrew is turning it into a little bit of a false dichotomy between those elite wing defenders. Okay, fine, they weren't going to be able to go out and get Tony Allen, but they have one guy who can credibly defend scoring wings with size, and that's Matt Barnes. And so they're not going to maybe they're not going to go out and find a guy who's going to lock a Durant or a LeBron or even an up and comer like a Kawhi Leonard down, but a guy who's going to credibly match up. So that if Barnes is hurt, gets in foul trouble, stops shooting well, then you're not just Blake, you got him, or just put Jamal on him and close our eyes, or just and instead going with another like Yvonne said, another kind of we have the Clippers have four guys who do the exact same thing, and maybe a guy who's not a good a shooter like a KJ McDaniels, or a guy who's a more versatile like a Kyle Anderson. Maybe those would have been, or definitely those would have added a different dimension to the roster rather than we'll throw all these sort of undersized, not great defensive 3-and-D types together, and maybe one of them will emerge. That's almost a lack of confidence in the decision-making process, and just hoping that if you whichever one pops out of the the bingo tumbler first will be the right one, and I don't love that as a bit of team building. So I mean, they didn't get worse, but that's running in place isn't probably good enough.
Right. Yeah. They didn't. They certainly didn't maximize everything that they had at their disposal. Yeah. I just want to say that when you said maybe there were other guys and then had to backtrack on yourself, no, there was definitely other guys. I thought that was pretty amusing. So does Doc Rivers, the general manager, get an incomplete? Is that what's going on here? That everyone doesn't necessarily love the things he's done, but they don't necessarily hate it either.
Look, when C.J. Wilcox was drafted, I was like, oh, there's a trade in the works involving Bullock. Right. That's what I figured. I was like, oh yeah, that must be the case. And then the days went by, and different news cycles came and went, and they're both still on the team. So yeah, I think it's definitely an incomplete. I guess what I find myself wondering, are there more moves? Are they shoring up this wing defense? Is that going to happen? I don't know. It seems like that was the biggest priority over the summer, and then it's kind of the summer's come and gone, and that hasn't really been addressed. So that leads you to believe one of two things. Either there's a move in the works, or the team looked out at what was available and decided, no, let's stick with what we got.
I mean, okay, let's break it down this way, because for the past 2 seasons, the Clippers have had the same 2 problems going into the offseason, and that was perimeter defense, and big man depth. And theoretically, Spencer Hawes' contract may not be wonderful, but it's not necessarily terrible either. Theoretically, the Clippers have shored up their big man depth. Which flaw seemed more glaring? If you could only fix one, which one would you fix? Let's start with Seth and go down the line.
I think the big man depth was more glaring, but there's also more an opportunity to aim higher than they did, and Haas is a weird fit. Because can you think that they can play Haas and Jordan together? I'm not. I don't know how much they can get away with that, because Haas's speed is questionable, I would say. But like we said, maybe you instead of throwing the full mid-level at Haas, you add a credible 4 and a credible 5 for the same amount. I mean, like Ed Davis, got $1 million. I would, contracts aside, I probably would have rather had him than Spencer Hawes. But so you add Ed Davis and like I said, Jason Smith, who's a guy who I've perhaps irrationally already overrated. But in any event, So you're right, it was the bigger need, but that also means that, kind of getting a B minus in what they got hurts more because it was a bigger gap to fill. Especially if they're in a situation where they want to maybe limit Blake and DeAndre's range. I think would be for a team of the Clippers' aspirations would be not an unwise thing to do. So, and now they're in a situation where since they've put all their eggs in the Spencer Hawes basket, if that doesn't work out, then it's still going to be Blake and DeAndre playing 38 minutes a night in February, which I don't think anyone really wants to see.
I'm going to go ahead and agree with Seth. I think the big man depth was the more glaring hole, but I think specifically it was more of a center that can protect the rim for 10 to 15 minutes a night whenever DeAndre is not on the floor. I don't think they solved that particular issue because it was basically last season whenever DeAndre is on the bench, they're treading water at best. Maybe doing a little bit better if, Doc's going with a funky small ball lineup that's kind of shooting the ball well or scoring well. But, for the most part, I don't think, playing Blake or Big Baby at center is providing much rim protection, especially in the playoffs. So I think they, if you want to go out and get Hawes, that's fine. Doc wants more shooting. They're a below average shooting team. I think we can all agree like stretch bigs have become a hot commodity and are super valuable right now. So go ahead and get Hawes, but then you need to go get someone that could protect the rim or be a plus defender. And Big Baby had some flashes of competence last season, but I wouldn't say he was that good defensively. And he was actually a worse rim protector than I thought he'd be. So I think they solved it in the sense of, yes, this is probably the best backup bigs they've had in the Chris Paul era. But I don't, I wouldn't say they completely solved it just because they don't have enough rim protection. And then, going to the perimeter defense, like no one said it yet, but the huge question mark is Jared Dudley. Like, is this guy going to lose 15 pounds and come back and be the player we thought? Because I know we were all excited about JJ, but I think everyone was really, really excited about Jared and kind of like, okay, now the Clippers have solved their small forward issue. They have this guy who's one of the best 3-and-D players in the league. He's going to start. Matt Barnes we're now relegating Barnes to the bench. Andrew's kind of giving me looks. I don't know.
I don't know that we go as far as to say like one of the best 3-and-D players in the league, but okay.
As a role, I mean, the thing about Dudley's been a better shooter than JJ Redick for his career, at least 3 points.
Well, that's the 3 part of 3-and-D. I don't.
Yeah, I think I've in my head overrated Dudley's defense,
Right.
But regardless, I think we all had much higher expectations for Jared.
He certainly
Dudley.
underperformed, right?
He had a good month and a half to start the season, and then he just plummeted, and it got so bad that they added Danny Granger, who was playing over him, and Reggie Bullock was playing over him at times, and actually deserved to. And Reggie Bullock had a horrible season. I think Dudley's kind of the X factor. They could have high hopes for him, and maybe are like, okay, well, we don't need to go sign a guy. We can fill our backup point guard, fill a backup center, and Dudley has a bounce back season. But I would be skeptical of that, if that's the thinking, because he had a good 15 games last year, and outside of that, it was pretty terrible.
I'm going to kind of buck the trend here. The original question was, what was the more glaring offseason need, the perimeter defense or backup big? Is that right?
Yeah.
Or a perimeter, a wing player or a backup big? I don't think it's close. It was a wing player. You guys are both right. You don't want DeAndre and Blake playing 38 minutes a night in February. But that doesn't matter. What matters is what happens in the playoffs. And you want those guys on the floor as much as they can possibly play in the playoffs. The backup center, like, it matters in the sense that you don't want to get murdered when your backup is out, and like they didn't have a backup center last year. Like, let's remember that. It's not that they needed a better backup center. They did not have a backup center. They had Big Baby playing center, but that's kind of like that's like an insane proposition. Hawes is not a plus defender, but he gives you at least the idea of rim protection at certain points, and he gets rebounds, which no person other than Blake Griffin, who's a forward on the Clippers, was capable of doing. Occasionally, Matt Barnes would get you a rebound, but like that's a big part of defense is actually coming up with the ball, and Hawes is going to be able to do that when the other team misses a shot. If you have him out there for 15 minutes a night, 10 minutes a night, I think that's important. I don't think they didn't address the bigger issue, which is Matt Barnes, despite us loving his hustle and like the grit with which he plays, is not a starting caliber NBA player. Like, he's a great bench player, and he's great at 20 minutes a night. I don't think you want him playing 35 minutes a night. I don't think you get a reward after a certain amount of time. I think it's like diminishing returns for extra minutes he's on the floor at this stage in his career. Despite like the great things that he does, he'd be so much better if he were playing 20 minutes instead of 30. That's my take. I just like, if Barnes is coming off the bench, you're in awesome shape. If Barnes is your starter and you're going a step down from there with your backup small forward, then it's like, okay, you really need to get a lot out of Matt Barnes, and there's not a guarantee you're going to get it every night in the playoffs.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Andrew, I believe you have a story for us.
Story time with Andrew Hahn.
Story.
I hate to disappoint you guys, but this is not it's a not suitable for public consumption kind of story. Like, I need to ensure that everyone.
So this was a post CBL story.
Yeah, this is a story that I can't share.
Okay, well, while we let our listeners or viewers' minds run wild with what kind of sordid details might be in this story, why don't we really quickly talk about the glaring absence on Team USA, which is a Los Angeles Clipper.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry, that was really homerific. I was trying to be silly, but Seth, what's missing for you in Team USA?
So many things. A rational team selection process. That's the number one thing that's missing. Because Mason Plumlee is going to Spain because something. Yeah, your guess. Because he was, of the big men we had in camp. So it's basically don't invite the right guys, and then instead of keeping Paul Millsap, keep Mason Plumlee, and then, well, we need another big guy, so Mason, I guess you're it. And now Mason Plumlee is, who's a nice player, had a fine rookie season. Good for him. He's not a. I mean, come on.
Seth, can you speculate a little bit on this since you went straight to the big men and DeAndre Jordan was in Team USA camp last year and everyone raved about him? Like, is there any logical conclusion you can come to as to why he wasn't at least given the invite this season?
I mean, it's possible that given their long season, the Clippers' long season, and the Sterling stuff still floating around, he let it be known that please don't ask me because I don't want to say no, have to say no. So that's possible as far as a reasonable reason. As far as beyond that, a good reason, no. I mean, you look at the downsides, and it's like, well, the free throw shooting, but Andre Drummond's on the team. The things that you'd want are athleticism, ability to defend the pick and roll and rebound and defend the rim. I mean that's you basically described DeAndre Jordan's game. So why are you reaching down to a guy who played? I mean, I think the elephant in the room is we all know the reason. The reason is that Mason Plumlee went to Duke, and Coach K is the coach, and therefore Mason Plumlee is now a Team USA guy. And I don't want to make this all about Mason Plumlee because I've ranted about him plenty in plenty of different forums, and he's more emblematic of a questionable decision making process rather than the only problem. So where Team USA is still the favorite heading into the World Cup, even with kind of the players making themselves not available either through injury or whatever reason, they should be a bigger favorite than they are, given the talent that was available. Surveying the whole landscape, and they just didn't make especially good use of it.
Yeah, something just occurred to me about all of this Team USA talk, which is like the most amount of Team USA talk I've bothered to engage in this entire summer. But like, it was kind of a blip in the radar as far as the Clipper fans were concerned that Blake was a part of this team early on and then pulled out because apparently there was some kind of fracture in his back and like he didn't want to have to play through the summer, and then apparently he was fine and no one really cared. I wrote about this briefly on True Hoop for anyone that wants to go see it. Go to whatever that website is. Look it up. I can't remember the URL off the top of my head. But Jovan, is Blake, was that ever an issue? Did it ever bother you that like, oh no, the prized power forward for the Clippers, arguably the best player on the team, third in MVP voting in 2014, apparently has back problems. It seemed like nothing came of it. No one freaked out.
No, I did freak. I was very scared when I found out. I think they did a good job of. I don't know whether it was the Clippers PR or Blake's, PR or both or whatever. I think they did a good job of kind of easing the concerns, and quickly there was a report that no, he wasn't because his back was injured. It was just kind of a precautionary measure, and he was a little concerned about it, so he just didn't want to aggravate it any further, and kind of just wanted to rest. And me personally, like if Chris isn't there, Blake isn't there, like I don't have a problem with either. I mean, obviously I want Blake to play. I was really disappointed he couldn't play in the 2012 Olympics. But Chris has been on 2 Olympic teams, has won gold medals. Blake, as much as I want him to play, like I'd rather him be healthy, personally. And obviously, we made such a big deal last offseason about him finally being healthy going into the season for like the first offseason. And that's something. If he can go in at least 90% healthy into this season, I think that's a win. So I don't have a problem with that, but it was scary. We don't know how serious it is. I mean, unless you guys have sources and know. Like I don't know how serious it is. We've seen his Instagram videos with Sasha Vujacic, which are hilarious, them working out and stuff. But yeah, I was concerned. I just think that they did a good job of making it seem like less of a big deal than it might be, and that kind of eased my concerns. But no, I was definitely scared when I heard the news.
Yeah, and despite the fact that other players are, depending on your perspective, using FIBA ball as kind of rehab for the season, it's probably better that Griffin doesn't do that. It's, like you said, Jovan, we saw the dividends that a full, healthy offseason paid for Griffin in terms of his leap from the last year. So it seems like he's actually going to be 100% healthy when the season starts, and we should probably expect a kind of a similar jump this coming year. I think we're getting pretty close to wrapping this thing up. why don't we go down the line, starting with Andrew? Tell me how you spent your summer vacation.
I How did I spend my summer vacation? You prepped us for this, and I still don't have an answer. I went to summer league, and I am still not recovered. That's how I spent my summer vacation. Uh, Vegas has sucked the life out of my teat, and and now I'm just the husk of the former person that you all once knew.
Wow, that's floral.
Jovan.
For me, it's just going to be, checking two nerdy basketball things off my bucket list. It would be going to summer league finally after wanting to go the last 2 summers and not being able to for various reasons. And then also, while I was in New York, I got to see Team USA play Puerto Rico, so I can, I guess, say I've officially seen Team USA play, even though it was an exhibition game. It was still pretty cool to see, and yeah, I'd say that those have been the two highlights of my summer so far. There's some other things, but it will have to be post CBL stories that I can't get into. But yeah.
I almost got Jovan in trouble there. You mean like the time you? No. For me, summer league was a good time. It's the first time I'd been in probably 4 years, and it was pretty amazing to see how my first time covering it, but also just amazing to see how much it's grown as a thing, and that was a lot of fun. And I guess the other fun thing of the summer is it was my daughter's first birthday this past weekend, so that.
Oh, happy
That
birthday
was,
to your daughter!
yeah,
Congrats
yeah.
on your birthday.
Yeah, so we've been, eating birthday cake so she doesn't have to. And between eating birthday cake and firing shots at Team USA, I think that's been a pretty full last couple of weeks for me.
Yeah, I can relate as I've been chasing my 8-month-old around, making sure she doesn't hit her head too hard, and ripping out my water-devouring lawn in favor of drought-resistant plants, since we have no water in this state, and getting sunburn because we've had a lot of great swell. That's about it for me. That and working, which is fun. All right, everybody. Let's look forward to hopefully a little bit more intrigue and drama in the next month or two before the season starts. Maybe there'll be some crazy deals or blockbuster trades that nobody saw coming, although I doubt it. And until then, for Seth Partnow, Jovan Bua, and Andrew Hahn, I am Patrick James, and I'm wishing you guys all a great night. Thanks.